Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we're taking a look at a very nice attacking game played by RubiChess as black against MrBob, TCEC Season 22, Swiss 3. Well, the game is very nice, and this opening position is also very interesting. Let's have a look how it came about. So this was one of those slightly strange TCC move orders. We get an Old Indian, and then we get a transposition back into the King's Indian Classical, where white plays the bishop to e2 and black plays the knight to d7 rather than c6 like the Mar-del-Plata variation. And white plays bishop e3. Now when white plays bishop e3, a few arrows there, white's idea is to play d5 and then move the knight from f3, either to d2 or e1 to d3. And the key point is to have these bishops on e3 and e2 guarding the kingside diagonals, and with the knight on f3 gone, the knight on f6 can't come to g4 or to h5 in order to launch the f7 to f5 break. So it's a very nice anti-King's Indian structure, and well, what you see with black here is that black's doing everything to disrupt it. The knight goes to g4, attacking the bishop on e3, it moves away, the knight moves back. So d5 was played. H6, bishop e3, knight g4 again, disrupting that, bishop d2, and now the move a5, stopping white from playing b4 in one go to expand on the queen side. Of course, white's main aim really is to expand on the queen side. After all, the dark squared bishop is on the h8 a1 diagonal, not on the f8 a3 diagonal, so that means that b4 and c5, well, should be easier for white to achieve. So a5 tries to get some sort of grip on the queenside dark squares. I mean, f5 has also been played in grandmaster chess. I think there was a game with g2 to g3. My engineers wanted to play takes and then g3, and after e4 you go knight h4, and the knight comes back round g2 to f4. It's a slight advantage for white, though not horrific for black by any means. But after a5, knight e1 was played, hitting that knight on g4. The knight comes back to f6, and as if by magic, after knight d3, then white has got that ideal setup. Okay, the bishop's on d2 rather than e3, but the key thing is that this bishop is on e2. It's covering this e2 h5 diagonal, and black can't go knight h5 followed by f5. Here in this position, black played the interesting move, which I think was a novelty, and that was to play b6. Now this is actually a really old-fashioned way of playing the King's Indian as black. This is what I learned as a child, so that's quite a few years ago. You put the pawns on a5 and b6, which aims to stop white from playing b4 and c5. And what you're going to aim to do at some stage is to play the move knight to c5. And well, if white exchanges off the knight on c5, then black either captures with the d pawn or with the b pawn. And well, these double pawns, pawn on c5 in particular, plus pawn on a5, that holds back white's queenside initiative a little bit. So putting a pawn on c5, of course, prevents c4 to c5, and having pawns on c5 and a5 prevents b4. So pretty old-fashioned way of playing it. Now black doesn't have to play knight c5 immediately. Black could also play a few moves like maybe knight h7, play for f5. Another typical idea for black is to play h5, king h7 and bishop h6, just swapping off the dark squared bishops. But this knight c5 move is always a possibility. Now what does white have in this position? Actually white's got a lot of moves here. Perhaps the most obvious, the blitz move, I think you'd say, is to play the move a3. It's actually the Leela move, so I can imagine Mr. Bede's already jumping with joy when he hears it. We'll look back at that move afterwards, because it has got a number of obvious features. I mean, it's supporting b4, but it's also got some slightly less obvious features. The sort of move I was most interested in, I suppose, the point is, you know, white's got this central space advantage, but white could actually play on both sides of the board. Obviously, you know, a3 and b4 is quite obvious, but you could also try and play something like g4, for example, just to clamp down on the king side maybe before trying to play on the queen side. So I had a number of ideas. I mean, one idea is King H1, and that's really borrowed from engines, because the engines very often play King H1. In fact, I think this was what both Komodo and Stockfish were playing. Not committing anything, you might play G4, you might play F4 at some stage, or you might just go back for A3 and B4. And this was, yeah, you know, very interesting line for white. One idea, just, you know, there's plenty of ideas that black can play. One game that was interesting was knight h7. Stockfish played queen e1 in this position, and after h5 played bishop d1. Just aiming to play the bishop a4 into c6, and quite interesting in actual fact. You know, I mean, whenever black plays moves like b6 and a5, I mean, that's moving pawns to set them up into a defensive structure, but it also weakens squares, so Stockfish going for this one. It's always a bit of a double-edged one, I have to say, because there are many cases, quite a few cases in chess literature, where having the bishop on c6, it's just like a big pawn. You know, it doesn't really do anything very much. But in this position, yeah, I mean, white actually managed to get a reasonable initiative here. I mean, this move f4, again quite typical. It does weaken the dark squares around the e4 pawn, but with the dark squared bishop gone, hard for black to really make something of it. And well, white gets the open, half-open h-file, and this pressure is quite annoying too. So Stockfish was playing f4 a lot, and here it managed to beat Komodo in quite a long game. The other ideas that I looked at were, yeah, g3 in this position. Why G3? Well, you know, often you're influenced by literature, and there's a very famous game, Petrosian against Gufeld from I think it's Moscow, 1961, where you know, Petrosian just plays this move in the middle, and he might want to play G4 later, he might want to play F4, he might just want to get his king super safe, but it's just an incredibly slow, flexible move. Yeah, I do think it's very engine-like as well, although the engines don't particularly like this one very much in this position. But I really think that Petrosian very much had the rhythm sometimes that engines have. You know, this unhurried preparation, and then all of a sudden uncoiling and striking. What the engines don't like about this move, actually, it's the weakness of the light squares, and they were causing me some problems when I was trying this. Even Leela on one node was causing some problems. So knight h7, something like queen c2, knight c5, f3, knight g5. And then we're going to try and play h5 to h4. It's just a little bit irritating, the fact that black's got access to this h3 square. But g3 is not a bad move at all. Looking through some other possibilities, f3 is possible just to support the pawn on e4. A little bit nervous about it all the time, because after all, I had my bishop on e2, stopping knight h5, and now black could play knight h5 if he wanted, although I might be able to meet that with g4. Another idea, I could play g4 immediately, just trying to clamp down. This one's an interesting one, queen c1. The idea is that you force king h7 and then you play queen c2. This is a maneuver that the creative Russian player Zvagintsev has played. And the idea is that you play your queen c2, but you force the king to h7. So when black plays f5, this diagonal will be open. Then we've got some other ideas still. b4 is one idea. So you're not trying to get a smooth pawn structure with a3 and b4. You're just saying, I'm going to take like this and then play a4 to a5 and break open the queen side that way and come in with your knights. I think it's quite interesting, but my engines were not very impressed. And finally, a final idea that you can try, even a4. I mean, you're looking for b4 later, and you're maybe looking to bring the rook over the third rank. Yeah, it's something that very similar to an idea in the Mar del Plata that a very strong player showed to me, and quite interesting. I would never have dreamt about it if never even would have entered my mind if I hadn't looked at Leela games and the rest in the King's Indian. But yeah, I mean, as you can see, plenty and plenty of possibilities. Let's go back to the Leela move, which is a3. And why would that one be interesting? Well, I mean, you've probably noticed a few times that black isn't always rushing with knight c5. You know, black's often just carrying on with, you know, getting the normal King's Indian counterplay going, knight h7, f5, and then maybe at some stage later playing knight c5. So a3 threatens b4. Well, that sort of forces black in a way to play the move knight c5. If you don't do it, if you play something like knight h7, then you go b4, and well, what have these moves really achieved? Not very much, really. a5, you've gone a3, b6. Is that going to be good that that you're trying to stop white from playing c5 there? I'm not sure. I mean, all that conflict on the queen side just means that white will open lots of lines, so this might actually end up just helping white if you leave it like that. So a3, knight c5, and now white's got a few possibilities. I mean, I always want to play knight c5, and I know that's playing into black's idea. After all, black wants you to take on c5 in order to get one of these pawns on c5 and hold back b4. But there are also some weaknesses that appear in the black structure when you do this, and this gives you quite a lot of idea for play. I mean, if you go b takes c5, again an idea that I probably wouldn't have spotted if it hadn't been for a game Leela against Komodo that's also in the Silicon Road. And what you do, strangely enough, you don't try and play b4, you just play a4. And after bishop d7, you go queen e1. And the idea is simply that you're going to protect the e4 pawn, maybe play f3, go knight b5, and then just try and win this pawn on a5. Very dangerous plan. Now, in the game Leela Komodo that I analysed in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, Leela had got its king on the queen side, which was definitely nicer. Also gave white a lot more possibilities because Leela sort of blocked the queen side and then advanced its king side pawns, gained space there, and then afterwards came through on the queen side. You don't quite have this here, but it's still pretty strong. The engines were evaluating this as about plus 0.9, and there were a lot of draws, but a few wins. So quite interesting. The other idea is d takes c5, and funnily enough, this is one of the things where I really do disagree with engines, because this is really, for me, the most natural idea. I'm not weakening my pawn structure so much, I feel, and I'm giving my knight on f6 a square on d6. What you do notice is that engines assess this as very good for white, often unable to make progress. As an example, I gave in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement again, where Stoneface was holding these very nicely against Stockfish. Here against Dragon, Stockfish was playing, again, a very nice plan. Simply bishop d3, and then this move f4. And here this is quite beautifully timed, because ef is met by the very powerful e5. And if you go bishop takes e5, then bishop f4. And you can't play f6 because bishop takes g6 is carnage. So after f4, bishop d7 was played, rook f3 from Stockfish, and then f5. And this got quite nasty for black. I mean, black's really restricted. We're going to double on the f-file, and once you've got control of the king side, I mean, you can always consider a move like b4 later. So white's got trumps on all sides of the boards, and Stockfish managed to beat Dragon in the game that I played in this line. So I mean, this move a3, very interesting. I mean, again, it's a pretty standard blitz move. But the key point about it is that you're trying to force black to take action before black's really ready. Because if black gets in knight h7, f5, and then later plays knight c5, well, kingside counterplay's already started, whilst you're trying to win the a pawn. Doing it like this straight away, black isn't even getting started, and you're already running for the a pawn. Now, what were my engines playing? Well, Leela was just playing knight h7, b4, knight g5, and saying we're just going to play this this position, go for kingside counterplay. I mean, I think white must be happy here. It's a typical King's Indian, and black's wasted a few moves on the queen side. So yeah, shouldn't be too bad at all, I think. Bishop a6 was what both Komodo and Stockfish were playing. Just hitting the pawn on c4 and actually trying to stop white's attack, stop white from playing b4 in that way. So, I mean, Stockfish was playing b3 here, and actually Komodo was even playing a4. Not sure about that one, but the idea is, of course, knight a4, there's knight takes e4. So, and of course, b takes a4. Well, we've got bishop takes c4, for example. So yeah, I mean that was quite an interesting passage of play, but yeah, in general Stockfish was emerging quite well with some cunning tactics. This was played, which was very nice. King h1, Queen e7, and then the move b4, and after bishop c4, just f3. And the idea is White is going to protect the e4 pawn, going to take the a4 pawn, and if you try and consolidate your bishop like that, I just go something like knight b2, and b5 is hanging. We'll always win a pawn back that way. Very clever idea, this, I have to say. You know, just yeah, I mean, Stockfish won this quite convincingly. But I mean, after b3, you don't actually have to play a4. The one thing I will say is that, you know, moving the bishop off the c8 h3 diagonal, it does mean that your kingside attack is well, losing major support. Black's probably going to have to move the bishop back in order to get the kingside attack going. But okay, you know, Black's aiming to go knight h7 f5, and then maybe later move the bishop back quickly and hope that you've slowed down the white queenside attack far enough. As you can see, I mean, it's quite subtle. I mean, there's loads of playing all over the board, trying to delay the opponent and then rushing back and you know, prosecuting your own attack. Very, very interesting. So this is a very strategically rich opening, and yeah, I mean, there are many moves in this position, and I mean, a3 is definitely good. I'd be tempted still by g3 or king h1, you know, the ultra flexibility really. What I'm sure about is that I'm not very happy with MrBob's choice, which was to play the move b3. Yeah, I've talked a few times recently, it must be becoming an obsession of mine, but about half moves, and you know, a move like b3, you know, it's not a bad move. It protects the pawn on c4, stops a5 to a4. But, you know, when you go, you want to go b4, really, you know, that's one of your big plans. And here, you know, well, you will just have wasted the tempo, a3 and b4. It's as if this move b6 has slowed White's queenside attack by one tempo. You know, it feels wrong, really. But I mean, it wasn't, you know, critical or anything, but it just doesn't feel to me like it's getting to real grips with the position. And what Rubi did was really lovely, actually. So knight h7 played, queen c1, attacking the pawn on h6, and now this great pawn sacrifice f5. Now this sacrifice of the pawn on h6, there's a great book called The Delayed Modern Benoni by the grandmaster Ivan Ivanisevich. And yeah, I mean, he's played a lot of these sort of pawn sacrifices, and there's a lovely example of a game of his against Aronian, about 2012, I think, where he does that. And I mean, Aronian was in all sorts of trouble, bailed out with a well-timed draw offer. But yeah, I mean, really very nice. The idea is, takes here, we just go f4, and then the bishops get exchanged, and then we just say, okay, I've lost my h-pawn, but that's actually kind of handy, you know. Got a big attack on h2. I mean, it's really, really dangerous. So Bob took on f5, and I mean, here, you know, Komodo, Stockfish, they don't even look at bishop takes h6. They're all looking to play a move like f4, which is a very typical way of blockading the black advance. And after e4, we go knight e1, and we're just going to try and blockade on e3, and hopefully maybe get a piece on d4. I mean, ideally you'd want to get the knight to c2, you want to play the bishop e3 to d4, and then play the knight to e3, you know, and get this beautiful blockade with a knight on e3, perfectly safe, attacking a pawn on f5, and we swap off the dark squared bishops and just drain the life out of your position. Again, in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, we see exactly this pan being played by Stoflace against Komodo, old style Komodo. Yeah, I mean, it's just quite a bit, well, it's pleasantly better for White, maybe something like 0.7 Stockfish evaluation. MrBob took on h6, and this was really very dangerous. Again, a far from obvious move if you haven't seen this before, f4. I mean, it looks really ugly, right? I mean, look at that, you're giving away this beautiful square on e4 for the knight. But again, it's all about the king side, and you know, it's one of those typical things that NNs handle so well, giving away pawns in order to open lines of the pieces and assessing those things so well. And well, Rubi does it brilliantly, because this is really, really dangerous. Now, of course, you know, if you put Stockfish or Komodo on this, they were still managing to hold this. I thought this was quite a nice, yeah, just very, very typical engine way of resolving such a problem. Queen h4, taking on c5, bishop d3, knight f6, and then this lovely move g3. Very bad form, really, to move a pawn in front of your king. But here the idea is simply, it's just tactics. We can just go queen g2, swap off queens, and you're over the worst. So, but MrBob wasn't really thinking about that. Still thinking that he was much better. So he played queen d1, queen h4, g3, queen h6. And, well, g3 is chase the queen back, but we've got some very weak light squares here. And we've got a knight coming into g5, which, hey presto, is targeting those squares. So knight b5, knight df6, knight takes c7, knight g5. Rubi not bothering at all about that rook. If you go knight a8, I've got this move queen h3. Very nice move, actually. Reminds me of actually one of my more painful memories where I lost a game. I think, yeah, more or less. I didn't lose many classical games after coming back from chess. Very, very few. But I lost one game in club chess, and that was against Hugo den Hertog, who's now a grandmaster. I saw he was a 2300 player at the time, but I thought he was going to be quite strong the way that he beat me. It wasn't quite like queen h3. It was actually a rook h3, well, rook h6 in the game. But it was that lovely little idea of stopping white from defending himself by moving a pawn forwards with a sort of a quiet move, getting closer, stopping h2 to h4, and then playing rook h8. And well, in that game, that came as a complete surprise to me. So not now, though. I recognise this theme here. So yeah, rook e1, I'd just go rook h8 and total carnage. So MrBob played h4, but we're already in the part of the game where you say that any move you make now just adds an extra weakness to be exploited. Knight takes c8, f takes g3 here, and we're coming in with queen h4 and queen e3 check even if you take on g3. So total carnage. So queen c1 was played. That's a very typical engine move, just you know, pinning a piece that wants to move forward and destroy your king side. But well, that just means that this rook survives. Rook e7, and I mean, Rubi's not actually rushing at all here. I mean, it's just there's just no way that white can shore up the king side, so you can take plenty of time, and especially the next move is really lovely too. King h8, just getting off the g file and preparing to double up on there. Very, very nice move. Rook e1, rook g7. I mean, complete disregard of Rubi all the time for material. But bishop h4, I go queen h4. And, well, we're coming in with rook takes g3. Also, f takes g3 is threatened because we've got off the pin there. So knight d6 played, trying to give back some material, you know, try and, if knight d6, maybe, I don't know, rook takes e5 or something, try and break things up. But it's too late now. And after knight d6, we've got knight g3, just breaking everything open here. Knight takes c8, queen h4. I reckon any of us humans could put away even stockfish from here. King g2, and the lovely little finish here is knight g4. With a beautiful little point that after rook h1, we go knight e3 check. Got to be taken. Took it with the queen, and then knight takes h1. Ah, king f1, f takes e3, and the end was nigh. There we are. I thought a very interesting game. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement looking at Mar del Plata structures, which is basically, you know, pawn storms on both sides, you know, white on the queen side, black on the king side. It's a very interesting little scenario that's similar to that, but not quite the same, because here black's really putting a huge amount of effort to interfere with white's queenside play, not just putting up a pawn barrier like you do in the Mar del Plata, often with a pawn on c5, but actually with the pawns b6, a5, and knight c5. And as you can see, lots of possibilities for white, but also I like very much this theme of you know, you play a move like a3 here, just to try and force black into the plan that he's eyeing, but before black's, you know, really got all the preparation ready. And then this is a very interesting idea that, again, I would never have spotted if it hadn't been for seeing engine games. You know, just fixing the opponent's pawn on the square where it can be attacked with queen e1, bishop d2, attacking the pawn on a5. So I think really instructive game there. And then, yeah, do remember, if you're a King's Indian player, do remember this Rubi sacrifice of the pawn on h6. Because, yeah, as I said, I've seen it now in a number of lines, and it is really, really dangerous. I think there's even an old game of, is it Stockfish against Ali Stein, where I think Ali did the same thing, and again got plenty of counterplay like this. So seen lots in engine games. Yeah, be one of the first to you know, to do it in human games. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. If you liked the video, why not give me a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at the Silicon Road Chess Improvement, which is available just in hardback, or rather in paper copy, softback, but also in Forward Chess, and Chessable is coming soon. So why not take a look at that? But otherwise, you know, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.